identified you as someone they'd love to work with on the Vox Pop video specifically.
It's interesting to see the intersection of consulting world and tech because I've been on both sides.
You're kind of top contender for this project specifically, so if we can get you on board with it, we can get contracts signed, that would be awesome.
Hi, I'm Megan, and I am a full-time tech content creator. When I say that, I don't think anybody knows what that means, so thought I would share a little bit about my story and how I got here to being a tech content creator, doing that full-time, even though I never thought I would be able to do something like that, nor did I ever want to. I was very proud of the tech career that I built in data analytics and data science. I broke into that field from a finance background after studying finance in undergrad and doing plenty of internships in that field, but 2 years into that career, I realized that I had no passion for it and I had no desire to grow. That realization that you have no desire to grow in a field should be the most telltale sign that you need to get the fuck out. And that was that for me. At the time, I was 2 years into my adult career when I was like, okay, it's time to go back to the drawing board and figure out what do I have passion for and what do my skills allow me to do and what positions are there even available out in the market to match those skills and experiences that I had. I thought back to undergrad when I had taken a couple of data analytics courses in my undergrad business school while I was majoring in finance. Those courses did really interest me at the time. I really loved the idea of using numbers to tell stories that could potentially influence business decisions and using that to speak to executives for their decisions. So I took 2 classes in data analytics and I was like, yeah, that was interesting enough. And that seems like tech. And I don't know why Okay, I'm back. I don't know if there was specifically a reason I chose tech. I think it just sounded cool, honestly, at the time. This was 2021 when the job market was hot in all fields, but especially tech. And so I think I was drawn in by how fancy it sounded and the promise that, you know, you could make a lot of money doing it. Like, I have no shame in saying that. If money is your motivator to switch into a field, there's absolutely no shame in that. And that was certainly the case for me when I wanted to break into tech, and I figured that data analytics was my best route in. And so I underwent a very intense job search to get my foot in the door at tech companies to be a data analyst. However, I found that the easiest path in was through my consulting background. What I did have was a background in consulting that I could lean on. I was a financial analyst at a Big Four consulting firm, and that Big Four consulting firm, the name carried weight. And so I used that to my advantage, along with the fact that I came with the transferable skills of being a consultant, being able to interact with clients, manage client expectations and timelines, etc. So I used that to my advantage and applied to data analyst roles at other consulting firms. And so I landed a data analyst role at a smaller consulting firm in DC. That interview process was pretty easy because they saw that I had the strength of the consulting skills. And so that role really believed in training on the job rather than coming into the job with the skills. And so I got really lucky landing that second role out of college to finally break into tech as a data analyst. Along the way, during that job search though, I had used LinkedIn the entire time. I was silently lurking on that platform, mostly to apply to jobs, which is the main way that people use LinkedIn, right? You were just using it as a job board and you're silently lurking on that platform because you don't want your prior employer to see that you are job searching. And that was totally me. I don't blame anyone for having that mentality of, you know, that's how you're supposed to use LinkedIn, because in school we are never taught otherwise. During that job search, as I was lurking on the platform, I noticed that there were these thought leaders and influencers whose posts often came up on my feed, and I learned so much from their posts, mostly about the data science field and data analytics field, but there were also thought leaders in like the recruiting space and the job searching space that I learned a lot from because I learned how to job search from them, including, you know, how to reach out to employers and recruiters to request coffee chats, how to speak with people who had the ability to potentially refer you to roles. And I learned that all through reading posts on LinkedIn. And that is ultimately how I landed that role as a data analyst. I networked my way there, requested coffee chats. And so fast forward to after I had landed that role as a data analyst, I was like, you know what? LinkedIn played such an important role in my transition. I kind of want to pay forward the knowledge that I gained from these thought leaders. I was like, let me have a hand at like creating my own posts with absolutely no intention of being an influencer or a thought leader myself. I was just like, I learned so much in that process and I have so much to get off my chest and share with people, and hopefully it helps somebody who was in my shoes. And so I started writing a couple LinkedIn posts here and there, your typical, I'm pleased to announce that I got this new job, or like, I got this certificate, or I went to this networking event, and just like shared that. And then I remember one day I wrote a post, one fateful post about this frustration that I had as a data analyst of like debugging your code late at night and then like not being able to figure it out until the next morning and it like suddenly comes to you. That was just like a funny thing that has happened to me, that had happened to me a lot. And so I was like, maybe a couple people will relate. And I remember I posted it, took a nap, woke up, and that post was blowing up. And so I was like sharing these relatable stories, maybe people find it entertaining or something. And so I created a couple more funny posts and they started to gain momentum. And that was the start of me really writing on LinkedIn, and soon to be like the rest of my career, all thanks to LinkedIn. Post-workout gains. Okay, we are back. I just came back from Solid Core. I barely made it. I have to kind of drive 30 minutes away, and it is very much a hassle, especially when I go right after work hours, but we made it. Anyway, I was saying that LinkedIn was really the start of my entire content creation journey. I started LinkedIn not to be a content creator, but just to share my thoughts, my frustrations, my experiences as an early data analyst, and I had no idea so many people would resonate with that, find value from it, find my posts funny at all, but they did. And so as more of my posts took off, not necessarily viral, but I could see consistent growth in engagement for my posts on LinkedIn, I was like, maybe being a creator on here is viable. And so my first 2 years, I did not really do anything on there besides share posts for the sake of growing my following. Like, I had no strategy. I was just sharing what I thought would honestly go viral and just trying to grow my following as much as possible without thinking about, what do I actually want to do with those followers. 2 years into my writing journey on LinkedIn also coincided with a time when companies started to experiment with sponsoring LinkedIn creators, because it is primarily a B2B platform. So a lot of companies that want to advertise to other businesses, they were looking for creators who had access to business leaders who could potentially be their customers. And so that's when they started to turn to LinkedIn creators to do that and to borrow their platform. And at the time when I started to monetize my LinkedIn platform, I had around maybe 80K followers on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is not a platform where there are a lot of creators. So at the time, 80K is a lot. And even today, 80K followers on LinkedIn is a lot. Now, when you compare that to other platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, that's not a lot, but there are just so many more creators on there. So anyway, that's when companies started reaching out to me to sponsor some of my posts. And at the time, I remember I was charging maybe like max $500 per post. And I used to think, wow, that is so much. And it honestly boggled my mind that any company would pay for my posts, much less LinkedIn posts. And over time, as my following grew, obviously the rates that I could charge also grew. During that
LinkedIn journey, in the background, I still had my corporate job. After being a data analyst, I left that job after 9 months to become a data scientist at an early stage startup. A recurring theme after that data analyst role were companies that recognized me for my following on LinkedIn, especially in the data world. There's a huge community of data professionals on LinkedIn. And so when these, especially data startups, notice somebody like me who has a big following, they want to tap into that. And so that's how I came onto a lot of the radars of these companies. And that's how I landed my data science role so quickly, along with my next role as a developer advocate at a data science startup. I landed those two roles really quickly because they recognized me for my voice and my platform on LinkedIn. Now, that was somewhat of a double-edged sword. Having that recognition was great, but at the same time, there was kind of a blurring of lines between my platform and theirs, where companies would expect that I would speak about their product and not speak about competitor products, right? That's self-explanatory, but I, as a creator, then started to have to turn down business that was coming my way if it was a competitor. And also, a lot of my posts had to be centered around the products, which kind of rubbed some people the wrong way because they were like, are these posts sponsored? Like, do you have to disclose that? Or are you just speaking about it as part of your job? And for both of those roles, I never had any kind of contract that delineated that, hey, my business is separate from theirs. But anyway, that's how I landed those two roles. And in the meantime, my LinkedIn following was growing. And eventually I was like, okay, maybe I do want to become more serious with this creator stuff. At this point, I had about 100K followers, and I did start to think about diversifying my platforms. I did try TikTok. I just suck at it because TikTok was just not my flavor, coming from a more buttoned up, serious and professional platform like LinkedIn. If you think about it, the audience on LinkedIn is polar opposite from the Gen Z audiences that are found on TikTok. And I think that's one reason why I never succeeded on that platform. I have 3,000 followers on there if you want to follow me. But my sweet spot was Instagram, where you have your millennials, your boomers, and your Gen Z all in one platform. And with my Instagram, I just started dabbling there because I was like, maybe I want to diversify my following. I didn't necessarily think about it strategically and how that would play into my overall monetization strategy. But to my surprise, that platform grew very fast. I think that I figured out, just like on LinkedIn, I figured out the formula to succeed on that platform as well. Maybe I can make a separate video on what I think the formulas are, but specifically for the audiences that I was trying to target, those early stage career professionals trying to break into tech and data science, there apparently was an audience for that on Instagram too. And so that's how I ran with that, and it grew very, very quickly. I hit 100K before a year mark on Instagram, and slowly the amount of sponsorships that were coming to me started proportionally growing from Instagram a lot more than LinkedIn. That makes sense because Instagram is just so much more mature when it comes to sponsorships. But with LinkedIn, there's more experimentation there. There is a curiosity from brands to sponsor that. And so now I would say it's pretty even between brand deals that come to me, that find me via Instagram versus LinkedIn. And for those of you wondering, yes, brand deals and sponsorships are my primary source of income right now. So jumping back to what I was doing on the corporate side of things, balancing my creator life with my corporate life, I was juggling the two, perhaps not successfully, because deep down I was feeling this sort of resentment towards my day job because it was taking away time and effort and mental energy from what I truly loved doing, which was creating content on my Instagram and LinkedIn platforms. And ultimately, it came to a head when I was fired from my last corporate job. I was a developer advocate at a data science startup. It was a very small startup, but cultural fit was awful. I was the only woman there. I was the only person of color there. And I was also the only American, AKA the only person in my time zone at this company. And again, they had hired me for my platform, but towards the end of my time there, I was like, well, maybe I don't want you hijacking my platform. Maybe I want to use this to build something of my own. And ultimately, it ended with a performance improvement plan, or a PIP. Because I was so checked out of that job, my CEO came to me and was like, hey, you're not doing a good job here. And I was like, yeah, I know, I don't want to. Ultimately, he ended up firing me for that. And it's kind of a he said, she said situation, because I told him I wanted to quit and he was like, not unless we fire you first. So it was a push and pull dynamic, but ultimately I was so happy to leave that job. Some may say that was the cowardly way out of starting my business, and I totally admit that. I don't think that I would have had the guts to take that plunge and start my own thing had I not been forced out. But regardless, I am so happy that happened. I have no regrets that it happened how it did and when it did, because there were no tears shed over that lost job ultimately. And I remember at the time I had made maybe like 10K in my business as a content creator. And for me, the scariness of generating my own revenue and depending on myself was not as scary as staying in a job that was making me miserable and making me lose sleep and giving me horrible anxiety every day. I was like, I don't care what comes next. I have to depend on myself. And I remember I had a talk with a really good friend. I asked her, what if I fail? And she said, well, Megan, you know yourself. Would you let yourself fail? And I was like, you're right. I would never. It also, this journey of me being a full-time tech content creator was born out of just this relentless faith in myself. I was not sure what the intermediate steps would be, but I knew that I was going to make it as long as, I had that drive and I love what I do. And fast forward to a year after being let go from that job, I can safely say I would not choose anything besides this path. Like there are really hard days. There are months when I am generating no income, and there are days when I'm getting rejected from brands. But despite those ups and downs, I genuinely love doing this. And I think looking back through all of my previous roles, I think that resentment of having to pick between my content creator life and my corporate life had always been there. It had always pointed me towards, this is what you are meant to do, as cheesy as that sounds. I had tried to suppress that thought until now. And now I'm fully embracing it. And I truly believe that this is what I was meant to do. So yeah, that's kind of the story of how I ended up here. I think I get the question of, do you think you'll return to corporate anytime soon? Just kidding. I think there is a possibility that I do one day, maybe, but I tend to be like a live in the moment kind of a person rather than like, oh, what's my 5-year, 10-year plan? And right now, this is what feels right.